The In-Sim Market Palce for Microsoft Flight Simulator is an in-house market where simmers can buy and install aircraft directly from the sim itself for both PC and Xbox. In this video, we're going to check out the 5 worst rated aircraft on the In-Sim Market Palce and see if they have value for money and deserve to be in the top 5 worst rated aircraft for flight sim on the In-Sim Market Palce. In recent times, we have seen many comments from the community about their frustrations of different aircraft that have been sold on the In-Sim Market Palce. Some of these comments we have seen from the community is that they believe that some of these aircraft have been developed so badly they shouldn't be sold anywhere at all. With that feedback from the community, we decided to purchase the 5 worst rated aircraft in the In-Sim Market Palce and quickly put them through their paces so you don't have to. To find the 5 worst rated aircraft on the In-Sim Market Palce, we sorted all the aircraft products and then sorted them from best to worst rated and then scrolled all the way down to the bottom of the page. For this video, I decided to only include aircraft that had engines and actually had a rating against them, as some of these aircraft that are in the In-Sim Market Palce, people haven't even bothered to do a rating. The rating system on the In-Sim Market Palce is rated by 5 stars, 1 being the worst and 5 being the greatest, and it's basically taking the average out of all the individual ratings. And now that we've established how the rating system works, how we found the 5 worst aircraft, let's jump into the list and take a look at the one that has the highest rating out of the 5, and we'll work our way down to see which one's going to be the worst. Kicking off with our first of the worst rated aircraft on the In-Sim Market Palce store with the highest of the rating out of the 5 that we looked at, which was the MSFS A4 Skyhawk. This A4 at the time of the recording of the video had 419 simmers who had purchased the add-on and actually even bothered to give the Skyhawk a rating, and out of those, 62% of them gave the Skyhawk only 1 star out of 5. That being said, taking a look at the features list on the In-Sim Market Palce when it comes to the A4, it basically said it was a high detailed model with fully animated 3D cockpits and 75% of all the gauges were animated. The aircraft is frame rate friendly for single and multiplayer use, and it has 4K and high definition PBR textures. The screenshots are pretty limited when it comes to the Skyhawk's homepage. It's a little hard to see what you're getting value for when you're purchasing this, with only a couple of cockpit shots, and the external shots were pretty far away. That being said, let's jump into the sim and check out the Skyhawk. Let's start with the Skyhawk's 3D external model. As you can see, it's a basic 3D model with a limited or no textures and bump mapping. Details when it comes to things like landing gear are very basic. The animations of the flying surfaces again are very basic, but they are there along with the landing gear animations. I had trouble actually getting the gear to come up on this particular aircraft. Moving over to the cockpit on first impression, it looks okay, but taking a closer look, next to no textures have also followed through from the external into the cockpit. Many of the gauges, knobs and switches don't actually work, and this one is one of the better ones when it comes to looking at the cockpit from MS Sceneries in my opinion. Moving along to the sound set, it's very general in this one. Even though the jet sounds have been used, it doesn't sound like it's from a Skyhawk at all. So far I have not heard any sounds from the actual cockpit switches or controls. A lot of it's just engine sounds on the Skyhawk A4. Taxiing the Skyhawk, it feels like a airliner. It turns like a very heavy airliner. Down the runway, the Skyhawk feels overpowered, and the aircraft rotates before it should do when it comes to the performance of the Skyhawk. The flight mechanics feel very generic and not really tailored to the real aircraft. I feel like you're flying a fighter jet back from the 60s and the 70s. As I mentioned before, I could not get the landing gear to retract in this one, even though the lever actually worked, and also I have a bound key, which is my G key. I think that's a default key for gear going up. I couldn't get the gear to go up on the Skyhawk. After a very basic flight, I stopped looking to find more things wrong with the Skyhawk and to see what wasn't working and what features appeared to be lacking with this release. After all of this, the MS Sceneries A4 Skyhawk, I find it's more suitable to an arcade flyer using an Xbox controller. I've used for other freeware products that are more in-depth when it comes to the features and systems than what this release has, and this is a payware product. The next aircraft on the list is another one from MS Sceneries, which is a recent release from them, which is the YF-23. The YF-23 has a rating of 1.5 stars, and unfortunately at the time of recording only had 2 ratings that have been registered for the aircraft. The featured list on the In-Sim Marketplace homepage for the aircraft had a very highly detailed model which is fully animated. 3D cockpit animations, 90% of all the gauges are animated in the cockpit. Frame rate friendly on single and multiplayer, has high detailed textures, 4 and 8K with high definition PBR textures. Very similar to what sort of feature list we saw with the previous aircraft, which was the Hawk. Again, there is a few screenshots here, but you do get a bit of more of an idea on this one what you're purchasing from seeing the screenshots. Jumping into the sim, and the cockpit of the Y-23 is super basic, even more basic than the Hawk, and just look at it. 90% of the gauges it worked, which was stated in the feature list, which in my opinion is pretty much correct because there's not many gauges in this aircraft that needed to be developed. The 3D textures of the cockpit is very basic, and getting a sense that the 3D assets have been used from other MS Scenery aircraft and being put into this one. Switches and knobs and animations are very basic with no sound again. The systems on the aircraft is very minimal with a limited autopilot, and the sound set is a very basic and generic engine. Moving over to the 3D external model of the YF-23, it's a little bit better than the Skyhawk that we just saw. That being said, don't bother zooming in really close as the textures get pretty blurry. That being said, there is some more detail when it comes to the aspects of this aircraft, such as landing gears, and the wheels are actually animated on this one. Taxiing the YF-23 feels exactly like the Skyhawk. It feels like a heavy airliner. So when it comes to the flight mechanic, they are very similar, feeling like I'm flying a Boeing 737. In that fact, the throttles were a little bit smoother on rotation and a little bit snappier, but you could fly the YF-23 with an Xbox controller with your eyes closed. There wasn't really any challenge when it comes to the flight mechanics in this one. At least with the Y-23, I could get the wheels to retract, but again, I did a very limited flight because I stopped looking to find problems and a lack of features when it comes to this release. If you are enjoying this video, please consider subscribing and boshing that like button. We plan to bring you weekly flight sim videos and streams all over 24. We're also closing and reaching on 100,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. We would love to have you on board before we reach that milestone, and thank you very much for your support. Third on the list, no surprise, it's another MS Scenery aircraft, which is the A10 Thunderbolt. The Thunderbolt has a rating of 1.6 stars with over 1,500 simmers who have purchased the A10 actually gave it a rating. 75% of those simmers have actually gave it the A10 a 1-star rating. Again, features on this one is limited, and it's same as the previous releases we saw from MS Scenery's high detail modeling, 3D cockpit animations, a frame rate friendly, high detail textures with PBR. This time they've used real sounds, they've stated in the features. Taking a look at the screenshots on the homepage, if you take your time to have a look at them, you get a bit of a real idea what you're in for when you purchase the A10. Moving into the sim, the aircraft cockpit seems to be one of the better 3D model cockpits from MS Scenery. That being said, it's still not a very good standard, and many of the switches and knobs are not functioning. At least at this time, the floor textures have been developed, even though they are very basic. Some of the switches in the cockpit are actually animated, but they don't have any systems behind it. They're basically blank switches. MS Scenery claims on the A10 that they have real sounds from the aircraft. That being said, the engine sounds are quite convincing, but that's pretty much where it stops there. The 3D aircraft model of the exterior is the most detail I've seen with any MS Scenery aircraft to date. Compare it to other aircraft on the In-Sim Marketplace at the same price level, it's pretty basic compared to other products. The engine blades on this one are actually modeled and they do spin around, and the control surfaces have been animated as well. Taxiing is slightly better with this add-on, which means it actually turns to the left and right at a believable turn right, but that's where the handling stops there. You don't even get the feel of this aircraft actually taxiing on the ground. It feels like it's hovering, just like the hoverboard in the Back to the Future. When it comes to flying the A10 Thunderbolt, the flight mechanics of the A10 feel very unrealistic. It feels like you could rotate this thing quicker than the Red Bull stunt plane. I could not get the ground gear to retract on this one, even using the gear lever up and down and the bound key, couldn't get it to work. Again, the A10 flies very similar to other MS Scenery aircraft with some tweaks to this particular model. It's not really much of a challenge or fun to fly in my opinion, so time to move on to the next aircraft on the list. The fourth worst rated aircraft in the In-Sim Market Palce, which is not an MS Scenery aircraft, it is the C-130 from Captain Sim. Captain Sim is selling this one as an exterior only release, which is very interesting in itself as it's not a fully complete add-on aircraft. The Captain Sim C-130 has a rating of 1.6 stars out of 5, which 997 simmers who purchased the C-130 actually bothered to give this one a rating, and with that 76% of simmers rated it a 1 star. The featured list on the In-Sim Market Palce homepage for the C-130 has it as a high detailed accurate replica of the C-130E, external cockpit and cabin, realistic animation, high res textures, 6 liveries. When it comes to the cockpit and the cabin, there is no virtual cockpit. Stock Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 functionality including HUD instruments. A complete cargo and cabin 3D modeling has been included, and also this has animated doors, custom views and a custom flight model. When taking a look at the homepage and looking at the screenshots of the C-130, it has many exterior shots and no cockpit screenshots, as there is no cockpit on this one. Jumping into the sim, unfortunately there is no virtual cockpit, only external 3D modeling. The external modeling and textures are the most detailed we have seen on aircraft on this list. However, I do not consider them highly detailed as they are described in the feature list. Yes, they're okay for the price. If you compare it to other aircraft going around for the same value for money, it's not that detailed. For just being able to fly a 3D model around in the sim, I was hoping for something a little bit more detailed and high resolution when it comes to this release. Moving on to actually flying the aircraft, the only way to start the C-130 is Control E that I know of, as there is no virtual cockpit. The animations are very believable, including the gear retraction and the engine start, including heat blur. The aircraft taxis and flight models are very believable and feel the most accurate we have seen so far on this list, but that's where the buck stops there on this release. There is no real relationship to when it comes to flying the C-130, as there's no virtual cockpit or systems model. It's a C-130 flying shell. It's basically flying a remote controlled plane in the flight simulator. Moving on to the last aircraft, which is the #1 worst rated aircraft add-on in the In-Sim Market Palce, which is the Eurofighter Typhoon from MS Sceneries, which has been given a rating of 1.4 stars from 7 simmers who have bothered to rate the Typhoon. 86 of these simmers gave the Typhoon a rating of 1 star. With all the other MS Scenery add-ons, I bet you can guess what the feature list is by now if you got this far in the video, which did include high detailed model, which is fully animated, 3D cockpit. 90% of all the gauges have been animated on this one. It also is frame rate friendly, has high detailed textures with 4 and 8K high definition textures. There is 7 screenshots on the homepage of the Eurofighter Typhoon, and again, you do get a bit of an idea of what you're getting for when you do purchase this by taking a look at the screenshots, so take your time to have a look at them. When it comes to the cockpit, it's very similar to the YF-23, and it's the most basic cockpit or virtual cockpit I've seen so far when it comes to aircraft on the list. Really, there is no system modeling except a basic autopilot and standard switches for startup and lights. The textures are as basic as you can get, and I feel as little effort has been done to do any texture work when it comes to the aircraft. Sounds are basic and not really believable with the Typhoon. Some basic engine sounds and startup sounds are included. You could not hear again any noises when it comes to using switches in the cockpit. The 3D model is very standard from MS Sceneries, just a basic 3D model with not too much attention to detail, and also it did include animated surfaces, but again the animations were pretty basic. The landing gear actually retracts on this one, but again, it is a very basic animation. There is no surprise when it comes to taxiing with the flight model. It feels very similar to the other MS Scenery aircraft I've talked about in the video so far, with some basic tweaks from aircraft to aircraft. Again, you could fly this one on an Xbox controller with ease with your eyes closed. After getting to the 5th aircraft by this stage, I just didn't really feel like flying any more of these aircraft that are actually on the list. All the aircraft on this list has been voted the worst for many reasons. These ratings were actually given by the simmers who actually purchased these aircraft. And yes, these releases are all on the lower end when it comes to price. But when it comes to these releases and you actually compare them to other releases at the same price range, they are very underwhelming add-ons, and the ratings that have been given to them really reflect that. I'm very happy that Microsoft Flight Simulator actually has a rating system. That being said, I would like to see comments added from people that have actually purchased the products to give feedback to simmers who are personally looking to buy that particular product, or even provide feedback to the developers. I'm sure there will be some purchases out there that have been made as consumers believe because it's on the Microsoft Flight Simulator in-store marketplace, it must be an okay product. As always, when it comes to purchasing flight sim products and add-ons, please do your own research when looking at that next purchase. If you want to know what my final thoughts were when it comes to these aircraft on the list, I will basically let you know what my actions were once I finished the video. I deleted all these add-ons and I will not fly any of them again. We pretty much did this video to showcase what these are about, so you didn't have to go and purchase them. That being said, please consider subscribing if you found value out of the effort we went through purchasing these add-ons, so you can get a bit of an expectation of what they are. Please be nice in the comments on this one. We would love to hear your comments in the comment section below and your thoughts about the products that made this list. We also look forward to seeing you on the next video.